The auctioneer's gavel struck wood with a sound that echoed through Kessa's bones, and she knew her life as she had understood it was ending in this dusty market square under a merciless summer sun. "Barren," the man in the stained vest announced to the gathered crowd, his voice carrying that particular mixture of disgust and pity reserved for broken things. "Examined by 3 healers, all confirmed. Not a single cycle in 2 years. Strong back, decent teeth, but no use for breeding stock. We're starting the bidding at 5 coppers. Kessa stood on the wooden platform with her wrists bound, her green skin dark with grime and bruises, and tried to remember when shame had stopped feeling like anything at all. Her small tusks pressed against her lower lip as she kept her mouth firmly closed. Speaking would only make things worse. The iron collar around her neck bore the stamp of the Greymark slavers who had taken her from the borderlands 6 months ago, and the chain attached to it rattled as she shifted her weight. Around her, human faces stared with varying degrees of curiosity and revulsion. A few orcs stood at the edges of the crowd, free ones who had earned their place in human settlements through years of servitude and compliance. But they would not meet her eyes. To acknowledge her would be to acknowledge what they had once been, what they feared becoming again. 5 coppers, a farmer called out, already sounding bored. 6, another countered, though his tone suggested he was bidding on a lame horse rather than a person. Kessa's pointed ears picked up the whispered conversations around the platform. Barren orcs were considered worthless in the territories where the wars still simmered. The clans cast them out, for an orc woman who could not bear children had no value to a society constantly replenishing warriors lost to human blades. The humans saw them as doubly cursed, monsters who could not even fulfill their monstrous purpose. She had stopped bleeding 2 summers ago, and at first she had thought it was stress from the constant moving, the fear that came with living in contested lands. Then the clan's shaman had examined her, declared her womb cold and dead, and the elders had sent her away with nothing but the clothes on her back. 3 days later, the Greymark raiders found her sleeping in a hollow tree. 7 coppers, a voice called, thin and reedy. The auctioneer looked ready to close the bidding when a new voice cut through the murmuring crowd. 20 silver. The square fell silent. Kessa's head snapped up, searching for the speaker. 20 silver was more than many families earned in half a year. It was an absurd price for any slave, let alone one declared worthless. The crowd parted reluctantly, and a man stepped forward. He was tall for a human, with dark hair that touched his shoulders and eyes the color of storm clouds. His clothes were simple but well made, the kind worn by someone who worked with his hands but was not poor. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that made the other men step back without realizing they were doing so. 20 silver, he repeated, his gaze fixed on the auctioneer rather than Kessa. I will pay it now. The auctioneer's expression transformed from bored contempt to obsequious pleasure in the space of a heartbeat. Of course, sir, you have excellent timing. This one is strong, as you can see, and experienced in field work. The unfortunate condition I mentioned actually makes her ideal for certain types of labor without the complications of, I understand what I am buying, the man said, his voice level but carrying an edge that made the auctioneer swallow his remaining words. Take my coin and give me the papers. The transaction happened quickly after that. Kessa watched in numb confusion as the man counted out silver pieces that gleamed in the sunlight, as the auctioneer handed over the ownership documents with a flourish, as her new master received the key to her collar. Throughout it all, he did not look at her once. When the papers were signed and the money exchanged, he finally turned in her direction. His expression was unreadable, neither cruel nor kind. "Come," he said simply, and started walking toward the edge of the square. Kessa's legs moved automatically, years of survival instinct overriding her confusion. The chain attached to her collar clinked with each step. She had been owned by 3 different masters since the slavers took her, each one worse than the last. The first had worked her in his fields until she collapsed each night. The second had tried to rent her out to other farmers, growing angry when they refused to take a barren orc even for simple labor. The third had barely fed her, considering it a waste of resources on something that would never provide a return on investment. This man had paid 20 silver. That kind of money came with expectations, and Kessa's stomach churned as she followed him through the streets of the border town. She had heard stories about what some humans did with orc slaves in the privacy of their homes, particularly those who were considered already ruined. They walked for perhaps 20 minutes, leaving the town center behind and moving into an area where buildings gave way to farmland and scattered homesteads. The man's pace was steady but not rushed, and he did not pull on the chain or look back to see if she was following. He simply assumed she would be there, which she was. Eventually, they reached a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. The wagon bed was empty except for some canvas sacks and a water barrel. The man opened the back and gestured. "Get in. It's a 3-hour ride to my land." Kessa climbed in awkwardly with her bound hands, half expecting him to chain her to the wagon. Instead, he produced a knife from his belt, and her entire body tensed. But he simply reached forward, grabbed her wrists, and cut through the rope binding them. "You will need your hands free to hold on," he said, as if this was obvious. "The roads are rough." Then he climbed onto the driver's seat and clicked his tongue at the horses, and they began to move. Kessa sat in the wagon bed, rubbing circulation back into her wrists and trying to understand what was happening. The collar was still locked around her neck, the chain pooled in her lap. She was still a slave. But this man had freed her hands without being asked, had paid an absurd price for her, and had not yet spoken a single cruel word. She did not trust it. Kindness from humans was usually a prelude to something worse. The countryside rolled past, green and gold with late summer growth. They passed other farms, small clusters of buildings surrounded by fields where crops grew in neat rows. Occasionally, she saw other people working the land, humans mostly, with a few orcs visible in the distance. Those orcs wore collars too. The man did not speak during the journey, and Kessa was grateful for it. She was exhausted in a way that went deeper than physical tiredness, worn down by months of uncertainty and abuse. The wagon's rocking motion was almost soothing despite her anxiety, and she found her eyes drifting half-closed as the sun warmed her battered skin. When the wagon finally stopped, she jerked awake, disoriented. The sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in amber light. They had arrived at a homestead that sat at the edge of cleared land, with forest pressing close on 3 sides. The house was modest but well-maintained, built of timber and stone with a solid roof and glass in the windows. Beyond it, she could see a barn, a chicken coop, and several fenced areas for animals. Fields stretched out to the east, rows of what looked like wheat and corn rippling in the breeze. The man climbed down from the driver's seat and came around to the back of the wagon. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been uncertainty. "My name is Vincent Larson," he said finally. "This is my land, worked by my hands. I live alone here. I need help with the harvest and the daily work, and I need someone who will not run off in the middle of the season looking for better prospects." He paused. "That is why I bought you, not for the reasons you might be thinking." Kessa stared at him, searching his face for the lie. Men always lied in her experience, but his expression remained steady, open in a way that made her throat tighten unexpectedly. "I do not know your name," he continued. "The papers just listed you as inventory item 47. Kessa," she said, and her voice came out rough from disuse. She had not spoken in days. "Kessa." He repeated it carefully as if testing the shape of it. "All right, come inside. You look half-starved and those wounds need tending." He turned and walked toward the house, not checking to see if she followed. Again that assumption of obedience, but there was something different about it now. It felt less like command and more like expectation, as if he simply believed she would make the reasonable choice. Kessa climbed out of the wagon on shaking legs and followed him across the yard. Chickens scattered from her path, clucking indignantly. The house's front door stood open and she hesitated at the threshold until Vincent looked back. "Come in," he said, gentler this time. "You are allowed inside." The interior was clean and spare, furnished with handmade furniture that showed skill in its construction. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and doorways led to what she assumed were other rooms. The space smelled like wood smoke and herbs, not unpleasant. Vincent moved to the fireplace and began building up the coals, adding kindling and larger wood until flames crackled to life. He filled a pot with water from a barrel in the corner and hung it over the fire to heat. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs at a rough wooden table. Kessa sat, acutely aware of how filthy she was, of how her presence was probably staining his furniture with road dust and sweat and worse things. Her hands rested on the table's surface, and she noticed how cracked and dry her skin had become, how her fingers trembled slightly with exhaustion. Vincent brought her a cup of water, and she drank it so fast she almost choked. He refilled it twice more before she finally felt the desperate thirst ease. Then he moved to a shelf and began gathering items: clean cloth, a jar of something that smelled medicinal, bandages. "May I see your injuries?" he asked. The question startled her. In 6 months of captivity, no one had asked permission to touch her. They had simply done what they wanted. Slowly she extended her arms. The worst damage was obvious. Rope burns around her wrists, bruises up her forearms from where the second owner had grabbed her, a long scrape on her left elbow from when she had been thrown into a wagon bed 3 towns ago. Vincent examined each injury with careful attention, his touch clinical and gentle. He cleaned the wounds with warm water when the pot heated enough, applied the salve that stung but then soothed, and wrapped bandages where they were needed. His hands were calloused from work but steady, and he never grabbed or squeezed unnecessarily. "You have bruises on your ribs," he observed. "Old ones, mostly healed. Are there other injuries I cannot see?" "Nothing that will not heal," Kessa said carefully. He accepted this without pressing. When he finished with her arms, he sat back and studied her face. "That collar needs to come off. The skin underneath is raw." "You have the key," she pointed out. "I do." He pulled it from his pocket, a small iron key that represented her bondage. "But I want you to understand something first. I bought you because the law requires ownership for you to stay on this land. The territories do not permit free orcs to settle without sponsorship, and sponsorship requires either citizenship or servitude. You are not a citizen, so servitude it had to be." Kessa said nothing, waiting for the other blade to drop. "But I did not buy you to treat you as property," Vincent continued. "I need help with this farm. It is too much for one person, especially during harvest. In exchange for your work, you will have food, shelter, and safety. When the season is done, if you wish to leave, I will not stop you. I will write you papers saying you worked here voluntarily, which might help you find other situations." It was too good to be believed. Kessa's instincts screamed that this was a trap, that his kindness was a tool to lower her guard before the real cruelty began. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Why pay 20 silver for something you claim not to want?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I had a brother," he said finally. "Younger than me by 3 years. When the border wars were at their worst, he joined the militia. I begged him not to go, but he was always the brave one, always the one who thought he could make a difference." His jaw tightened. "He was killed in a skirmish 2 years ago. The captain who sent his body home said he died protecting an orc child who had wandered into the battlefield. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, separated from her clan during the fighting." Kessa's breath caught. "My brother gave his life for that child," Vincent said, and now she could hear the grief threaded through his words. He did not see a monster or an enemy. He saw someone small and terrified who needed help. "The captain said the child survived, that she ran back to orc lines before the fighting started again. I like to think she made it home." He looked at Kessa directly. "I cannot bring my brother back. I cannot undo the wars or change how people think, but I can choose not to add to the cruelty. I can choose to see people instead of categories." The silence that followed was heavy with things neither of them knew how to articulate. Kessa felt something crack in the careful walls she had built around herself, some small fissure letting in light. "I will work," she said, her voice rough. "I will work hard and I will not run. Not until the season is done, as you said. Then we have an agreement." Vincent reached forward with the key and unlocked the collar. The metal fell away and Kessa gasped at the sudden relief. She had worn it for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to have nothing pressing against her throat. Her hands flew up to touch the exposed skin, feeling the raw patches and the indent the iron had left. "That will heal," Vincent said. "In the meantime, you should eat something, and then I will show you where you will sleep." He prepared food while she sat at the table, still processing what had happened. The meal was simple but generous. Bread, cheese, cold meat, and an apple that crunched sweetly when she bit into it. Kessa ate slowly at first, afraid of making herself sick, but Vincent kept placing more on her plate until she had consumed more food than she had seen in the past week combined. When she finished, he led her outside and across the yard to the barn. She tensed, assuming he meant for her to sleep with the animals, but instead he took her to a small room built into the barn side. It was clearly designed for human habitation. There was a real bed with a straw mattress and blankets, a small table, a chair, and a trunk for storage. A window looked out over the fields and an oil lamp hung from a hook on the wall. "This was built for a farmhand I thought I might hire," Vincent explained. "The money never stretched that far, so it has sat empty. It is yours now." Kessa stepped inside, touching the blankets with disbelieving fingers. They were clean and thick, meant to keep someone warm through winter nights. "There is a pump outside for washing, and the privy is behind the barn," Vincent continued. "I will wake you at dawn. We have much work to do with the harvest coming." He paused in the doorway. "Rest well, Kessa." Then he was gone, walking back to the main house across the darkening yard, and Kessa was alone with her confusion and the tiny spark of something that might have been hope. She did not trust it. She could not afford to trust it. But that night, she slept in a real bed for the first time in half a year, and no one came to hurt her in the darkness. The rooster's crow woke her before dawn, and for a disorienting moment, Kessa forgot where she was. Then memory returned, along with the ache of her healing injuries, and she sat up carefully. Her small room was still dim, but growing lighter as the sun approached the horizon. She used the pump to wash as best she could in the cold water, scrubbing away layers of grime until her green skin showed its true color again. Her reflection in the water's surface showed her a stranger. Hollow-cheeked, with shadows under her dark eyes, her short black hair matted and uneven where someone had hacked it off for convenience. Vincent was already awake when she approached the main house, smoke rising from the chimney. He met her at the door with a bundle of cloth. "These might fit you," he said. "They were my brother's. He was not tall, but he was broad in the shoulders like you." The clothes were simple work garments, a linen shirt, canvas trousers, and a leather belt. They fit reasonably well, much better than the ragged dress she had been wearing. The fabric was soft from washing, worn comfortable rather than worn out. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Breakfast was porridge with honey and more of the apples, eaten quickly while Vincent outlined the work ahead. The wheat was ready for harvesting, he explained, and it was a race to get it cut and stored before weather could ruin the crop. With two of them working, it would still take weeks of dawn to dusk labor, but it was possible. "Have you worked harvest before?" he asked. "Many times," Kessa confirmed. "I know wheat, corn, and barley. I can sharpen blades and bind sheaves." Relief flashed across Vincent's face. "Good. That will make this easier." They worked side by side as the sun rose, cutting the wheat with long scythes in rhythmic sweeps. Vincent set a steady pace, not pushing for speed but maintaining consistent progress. He showed Kessa where to strike the stalks, how to lay them properly for binding, and when to stop for water breaks. The work was hard but familiar, and Kessa fell into the rhythm of it gratefully. Physical labor gave her something to focus on besides her churning thoughts. Sweat soaked her borrowed shirt as the day heated up, and her muscles burned with effort, but it was clean pain, the kind that came from useful work rather than abuse. Vincent did not talk much while they worked, but what he did say was practical and respectful. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she suggested a more efficient way to stack the sheaves, and thanked her when she pointed out a section of wheat that showed signs of blight and should be harvested separately. When the sun reached its peak, he called a halt and they returned to the house for a midday meal. He had prepared it earlier: bread, butter, more cheese, and cold cider that tasted like apples in autumn. They ate on the porch where a breeze could reach them, and Kessa found herself relaxing in small increments. "You are a good worker," Vincent observed. "Better than I expected, honestly. No offense meant, none taken. You paid for a slave, you got a farmer instead." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I suppose I did." "Where did you learn farming?" Kessa asked, then immediately worried she had overstepped. Slaves were not supposed to ask questions of their masters, but Vincent answered easily. "My father had land farther east, but it was small and there were 3 sons. I knew I would inherit nothing, so I joined the military to earn money. I spent 5 years as a soldier, saved everything I could, and bought this land when my service ended." He gestured at the fields around them. "It has been 3 years now. Hard work, but mine." "Your brother did not want to farm with you." Vincent's expression grew distant. "He did, actually. He came out here for 1 season, helped me clear the northern field and build the barn. But then the fighting intensified and he felt he should go. Said I had already done my part and now it was his turn." He was quiet for a moment. "I should have stopped him." "Could you have?" Kessa asked gently. "No, but I should have tried harder." They returned to work after the meal, cutting wheat until the sun began its descent toward the horizon. By the time Vincent called the day done, Kessa's hands were blistered despite the calluses, and every muscle in her body screamed with fatigue. But they had made real progress, clearing nearly an acre of the wheat field. Vincent prepared dinner while Kessa washed at the pump, the cold water a blessing against her overheated skin. The meal was vegetable stew with chunks of meat, thick and savory, served with bread for soaking up the gravy. Kessa ate until she thought she might burst, unable to remember the last time she had felt truly full. "Same time tomorrow," Vincent said as she prepared to return to her room. "We will keep this pace until the wheat is in, then move to the corn." "I will be ready," Kessa promised. This became their pattern, waking at dawn, working until they could barely stand, eating well and sleeping hard. Days blurred together in a haze of physical effort and growing trust. Vincent remained patient and respectful, never raising his voice or his hand. When Kessa made mistakes, he corrected them calmly. When she did something well, he acknowledged it. Slowly, carefully, Kessa began to believe that maybe he truly meant what he had said that first night. Maybe this was real, this strange arrangement where she was treated like a person rather than property. 2 weeks into the harvest, they were working in the far corner of the wheat field when Vincent's scythe struck a rock hidden in the soil. The blade deflected badly and sliced across his forearm, cutting deep enough that blood immediately welled up and dripped down his wrist. "Damn," he said, pressing his other hand over the wound. "That was foolish of me." Kessa dropped her own scythe and ran to him. "Let me see." He removed his hand reluctantly, and she examined the injury with experienced eyes. It was not life-threatening, but it was deep, and it would need cleaning and binding to prevent infection. "Come," she said firmly, and began walking toward the house. "The work," Vincent started, "can wait." "You cannot work with one hand." He followed her, which felt strange and significant. In the house, Kessa took charge without thinking about it, heating water and gathering the same supplies he had used on her injuries weeks ago. She cleaned the wound carefully, applied the salve, and wrapped it in clean bandages. "You are good at this," Vincent observed, watching her work. "I was a healer's apprentice before." Kessa said it without thinking, then froze. She did not talk about before your clan cast you out. Vincent's voice was gentle, not pushing. "Yes," she tied off the bandage. "The shaman taught me about wounds and sickness, about which plants heal and which ones kill. I thought I would spend my life helping people." Her laugh was bitter. "But then my bleeding stopped and none of that mattered anymore." "It matters," Vincent said quietly. "You just proved it matters. Knowledge does not become worthless because circumstances change." Kessa looked up at him, and something passed between them that was more than words. His eyes were kind, genuinely kind, and she realized with a start that she had begun to think of him as something other than her master. He had become simply Vincent, the man she worked beside, who treated her with respect and fed her from his own table. The realization terrified her. She stepped back quickly, gathering up the bloodied cloths. "You should rest today. I can finish the field." "Kessa, please." She did not look at him. "Let me work." He must have heard something in her voice because he nodded slowly. "All right, but come back for the midday meal." She did, though she kept her distance emotionally even as they sat across from each other. Vincent did not press, seeming to understand that she needed space to process whatever she was feeling. The harvest continued. Vincent's arm healed cleanly, though he was more careful around hidden obstacles after that. The wheat was cut, bound, and stored in the barn. They moved on to the corn, working through rows of tall stalks that rustled in the wind. The weather held, sunny and dry, perfect for harvest work. One evening after they had finished for the day, Kessa was washing at the pump when she heard shouting from the direction of the road. She looked up to see 3 men on horses approaching the homestead, their voices raised and angry. Vincent emerged from the house at the commotion, and Kessa saw his expression harden as he recognized the riders. "Larson," the lead rider called out. He was a heavy man with a graying beard and clothes that marked him as prosperous. "We need to talk." "Brennan," Vincent replied, his voice neutral. "What brings you out here?" "You know damn well what brings me." Brennan dismounted, his companions following suit. You bought an orc at market 2 weeks ago. My wife saw the whole thing, paid a fortune for it, she said. I bought a worker, Vincent corrected. What business is it of yours? It's everyone's business when you bring those things into our area. Brennan spat to the side. We have enough trouble with raiding parties from the border clans. We do not need sympathizers inviting them into our homes. Kessa is not a raiding party. She is one person helping with my harvest. Kessa, Brennan's face twisted. You gave it a name. Christ, Larson, have you lost your mind? These creatures are animals. You cannot trust them. They will cut your throat the moment you turn your back. Kessa stood frozen by the pump, her hands gripping the handle hard enough to hurt. This was familiar, this hatred. She had seen it in every town, on every face that looked at her. You will leave my land, Vincent said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Now, or what, you will fight us. Brennan gestured to his companions. There are 3 of us, Larson, and you are alone out here with nothing but an orc for company. People are starting to talk. They are saying you have become one of those fetishists who prefers green skin to human women. That true? Vincent's hands clenched into fists. Get out. We came to warn you, neighbor to neighbor. Send that thing away or we will do it for you. The council is already discussing it. We do not want orcs settling in our territory, even if they are collared. Brennan remounted his horse. Think about it, Larson. Think about whether one slave is worth losing your place in this community. The 3 men rode off, leaving dust and tension in their wake. Vincent stood rigid until they disappeared around the bend in the road. Then his shoulders sagged. Kessa approached slowly. I should leave. No, I am causing you trouble. Those men are ignorant cowards, Vincent said harshly. And I do not make decisions based on what ignorant cowards think. But if the council can go to hell. He turned to face her, and she saw fury in his eyes, though it was not directed at her. I will not send you away because small-minded people cannot see past their prejudices. You have done nothing wrong. You work hard, you cause no trouble, and you have every right to be here. I am an orc, Kessa said flatly. That is crime enough for most humans. It is not a crime to me. Vincent's voice softened. Kessa, I meant what I said that first night. You are not property to me. You are a person who deserves basic dignity and respect. I will not throw you out to appease men like Brennan. Something in Kessa's chest twisted painfully. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he would not change his mind when pressure increased. But she had been disappointed too many times. If I stay, they will make your life difficult, she said. They can try. Vincent managed a grim smile. I have dealt with difficult before. Come on, dinner is ready. They ate together in the kitchen, both of them subdued. Kessa kept replaying Brennan's words in her head, the casual cruelty and the assumption that she was less than human. It was nothing she had not heard before, but it stung worse somehow, coming after weeks of being treated like a person by Vincent. What did he mean about fetishists? She asked finally. Vincent looked uncomfortable. There are some humans who seek out orc slaves for sexual purposes. There is a market for it in some cities, though it is not spoken of openly. Brennan was implying that I bought you for that reason. Kessa's stomach turned. She had heard rumors of such things but had never experienced it herself. Is that what people will think? Some might. But anyone who knows me will know better. Vincent met her eyes. I have never touched you inappropriately, and I never will. You have my word on that. I know, Kessa said, and realized she meant it. In all their time together, Vincent had been nothing but respectful. He had never leered or made suggestive comments, never invaded her space or made her feel unsafe. If anything, he seemed almost excessively careful about maintaining proper boundaries. I trust you. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with significance. Vincent's expression softened into something almost vulnerable. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." They finished eating in more comfortable silence, and Kessa returned to her small room feeling unsettled but not afraid. Vincent had stood up for her, had defended her against his own people. That meant something, though she was not sure what yet. 3 days later, they found the dead chicken. Kessa discovered it when she went to collect eggs in the morning. The bird had been killed violently, its neck broken, and left prominently displayed on the fence post where anyone approaching would see it. Beside it, someone had painted a crude symbol in what looked like blood, a circle with a slash through it. She brought Vincent immediately. His face went grim when he saw it. "A warning," he said flatly. "From Brennan, probably. Or someone he stirred up." Vincent removed the dead bird and scrubbed the fence post clean. "We need to be more careful. Keep closer to the house when you are working." "Vincent, I am not sending you away," he said, anticipating her argument. "But I am not a fool either. If they are willing to do this, they might escalate. I want you where I can see you during the day." Kessa nodded reluctantly. The incident had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The casual cruelty of killing an innocent animal just to send a message reminded her of how much hatred existed in the world. They rearranged their work to keep them in adjacent fields, within shouting distance of each other. Vincent began carrying a knife openly on his belt, and he moved his father's old sword from storage to a place beside the door where it could be grabbed quickly. The atmosphere had changed. What had been peaceful routine now carried an undercurrent of tension. Kessa caught herself constantly scanning the tree line, watching for movement. At night, she lay awake listening to every sound, wondering if someone would come to burn the barn with her inside it. Vincent seemed equally on edge, though he tried to hide it. His smiles came less easily, and his attention was always divided between his work and watching the approaches to his land. A week passed without incident. Then another. Slowly, they began to relax again, hoping the dead chicken had been an isolated act of cowardice rather than the prelude to something worse. The corn harvest finished, and they moved to the final task, digging up the potato crop. It was backbreaking work, turning over soil and searching for the buried tubers, but it was also the last major task before winter preparations began. They worked side by side, their hands in the dirt, unearthing potatoes and placing them in baskets. "When this is done, you will have fulfilled your agreement," Vincent said during a water break. "The harvest will be complete." Kessa's heart clenched. She had known this was coming, but hearing him say it made it real. "Yes. Have you thought about what you want to do? You could stay through the winter if you like. The work is lighter, but there is still plenty to do. Or I can write you those papers I promised, give you some traveling money, and you can seek a position elsewhere." He kept his voice carefully neutral, but Kessa had learned to read his expressions over their weeks together. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he would not quite meet her eyes. He was trying to give her a choice without influencing it, but he cared about what she decided. The realization struck her like lightning. She cared too. Somewhere in the daily routine of work and meals and careful kindness, she had stopped seeing Vincent as a master or even an employer. She saw him as a friend, possibly the only real friend she had ever had. And maybe something more than that, though she barely dared name it even in her own thoughts. "I want to stay," she said, and watched relief flood across his face. "You are sure? You do not have to feel obligated, I am sure." Kessa smiled, small and tentative. "Where else would I go? This is the first place I have felt safe in years." Vincent returned her smile, and the warmth in it made her breath catch. "Then you will stay. We will work out a proper arrangement. I cannot pay you much, but I can pay something, and you will continue to have room and board." "You do not have to pay me." "Yes, I do. You are not a slave, Kessa. You are a worker and workers deserve wages." He paused, then added more quietly, "and a friend. Friends deserve better than to be taken advantage of." The word friend settled around Kessa like a blanket. Yes. That was what they were, what they had become. And it felt good to name it. They finished the potato harvest in good spirits, storing the crop in the root cellar Vincent had dug into the side of a low hill. The cellar was cool and dark, perfect for keeping vegetables through the winter months. When the last basket was emptied and stored, Vincent declared a day of rest. "We have been working dawn to dusk for a month," he said. "We deserve a break." The rest day felt strange and indulgent. Kessa slept late, woke to a leisurely breakfast, and then wandered the homestead with no particular purpose. She found herself at the edge of the northern field, looking out at the forest beyond. The woods were beautiful in the autumn light, leaves turning gold and crimson. She had been avoiding them, knowing that woods meant cover for anyone who wished them harm. But standing here in the sunshine, it was hard to imagine danger lurking in that peaceful scene. She heard footsteps and turned to find Vincent approaching with 2 apples and a canteen. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, offering her an apple. They sat on a fallen log at the field's edge, eating and watching the forest. Birds called back and forth, and somewhere a squirrel chattered indignantly. "It is pretty here," Kessa said, "peaceful. That is why I chose this land. After 5 years of war, I wanted somewhere quiet." Vincent was silent for a moment. "Do you miss your clan?" The question surprised her. "Sometimes. They cast me out, but they were still my people. I miss my sister most. She was younger, still learning to hunt. I wonder if she is well." "You were close, very. She cried when the elders sent me away, begged them to let me stay. But there is no place in Orc society for a barren woman. We are seen as cursed, broken." Kessa's hands tightened around her apple. "I understood why they did it. That does not make it hurt less." "I am sorry," Vincent said, and she knew he meant it. "What about you? Do you have other family besides your brother?" "My parents are still alive, living on their land in the east. My oldest brother inherited it when my father grew too old to work it properly. We exchange letters sometimes, but I have not visited in 2 years. The distance is far, and leaving the farm is difficult." "Do they know about me?" Vincent shook his head. "I have not written since I bought you. I was not sure how to explain it without them worrying or judging. Because I am an Orc. Because they would not understand." He looked at her directly. "My parents are good people, but they are also traditional. They believe the stories about Orcs being savage and untrustworthy. I could tell them about you, about how hard you work and how wrong those stories are, and they would assume I was being naive or bewitched." "Maybe you are," Kessa said lightly, trying for humor. Vincent smiled, but his eyes were serious. "If I am, I do not want to be cured." Something electric passed between them, a moment of awareness that made Kessa's pulse quicken. She looked away quickly, focusing on her apple, but she could feel the weight of Vincent's gaze on her. This was dangerous territory. They had built something good here, something rare, mutual respect and genuine friendship. To want more, to even think about more, was to risk destroying everything, but she could not deny that something had shifted between them. The way her heart jumped when he smiled at her, the way she found herself watching him when he worked, the warmth that spread through her chest when he called her his friend. She had never felt anything like this before. In her clan, relationships had been practical arrangements made for the good of the community. Her brief betrothal to another young Orc had been cordial but not passionate, and it had dissolved the moment her barrenness was discovered. But this feeling when she looked at Vincent, this wanting, was entirely new and terrifying. "We should get back," she said abruptly, standing. "There is still work to do before winter." If Vincent was disappointed by her sudden retreat, he did not show it. He simply stood and followed her back toward the house, maintaining a respectful distance. They threw themselves into winter preparations, repairing fences, securing the barn against cold weather, cutting firewood, and laying in supplies. The work was steady if not exhausting, and it gave Kessa something to focus on besides her increasingly complicated feelings. Vincent began teaching her other skills: how to repair leather harnesses, how to preserve meat properly, how to make candles from tallow. She taught him some of what she knew about herbal medicine, showing him which plants to gather before the frost killed them, how to dry and store them for winter ailments. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together like two parts of a well-oiled machine. Evenings were spent in the main house now, as the nights grew cold. Vincent would build up the fire while Kessa prepared dinner, and afterward they would sit and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about his time in the military, carefully editing out the worst parts. She told him about growing up in the clan, about learning to track deer and identify poisonous mushrooms. It felt like building something, brick by brick, though Kessa was not sure what the final structure would be. The first snow came in mid-autumn, a light dusting that melted by noon. But it was a reminder that true winter was coming, and with it the isolation that would trap them on the homestead for months. "We should go to town before the roads become impassable," Vincent said over breakfast one morning. "We need supplies I cannot make or grow: salt, sugar, lamp oil. And I need to sell some of the harvest to pay for it." Kessa's stomach tightened. "Will I come with you?" "Do you want to?" She thought about the market where she had been sold, about the stares and whispers and open hostility, about men like Brennan who saw her as a thing to be removed. "No," she admitted, "but I will if you need me to." Vincent shook his head. "I can manage alone. You stay here, keep the home fires burning. I will be back before dark." Relief and guilt warred in Kessa's chest. She was grateful not to face the town, but she hated herself for cowardice. "Be careful, always." He smiled at her, and she tried to smile back. Vincent left at dawn with the wagon loaded with sacks of wheat and corn, along with preserved vegetables to sell or trade. Kessa watched him go with an anxiety she could not entirely explain. He would be fine. He was a grown man who had lived alone for years before she arrived. He did not need her protection, but she worried anyway. The day stretched long and empty without him. Kessa did chores to keep herself busy, feeding the animals, collecting eggs, repairing a weak spot in the chicken coop fence. But her attention kept drifting to the road, watching for Vincent's return. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when she finally heard the wagon. She was outside instantly, relief flooding through her, only to freeze when she saw that Vincent was not alone. Two men sat beside him on the wagon seat, and both turned to stare at her as the wagon rolled into the yard. Kessa recognized them from Brennan's group, though she did not know their names. Vincent jumped down quickly, positioning himself between Kessa and the men. "Thank you for the escort," he said, his voice tight. "You can leave now." "We wanted to see for ourselves," one of the men said. He was younger than Brennan, with a thin mustache and calculating eyes. "Wanted to see if the rumors were true about Larson keeping an orc. You have seen, now leave." "She is not wearing a collar," the second man observed. He was older, with a scar across his cheek. "The law says orcs on human land must be collared and controlled. You are in violation, Larson. She is on my land doing work I hired her for. That is legal." "Hired?" the young man laughed. "You are paying it wages. Christ, you are more far gone than we thought." Vincent's hand moved to the knife on his belt. "Get off my property." The men exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then the young one shrugged. "Fine. But we will be telling the council about this. They will want to inspect your situation, make sure you are in compliance with territorial law. Let them inspect. They will find nothing wrong. The men climbed down from the wagon, moving with deliberate slowness. As they passed Kessa, the scarred one spat near her feet. "Abomination," he muttered. Vincent's hand tightened on his knife, but he did not draw it. He simply watched until the men mounted their horses and rode away. When they were gone, he turned to Kessa. "Are you all right?" "I am fine." "What happened in town?" "Nothing good." Vincent began unloading supplies from the wagon, his movements sharp with anger. "Brennan has been spreading stories. People are talking, saying I have gone mad, that I am consorting with the enemy. Those two followed me back, claiming they wanted to make sure I was safe. In truth, they wanted to gather evidence to bring to the council." "You should send me away," Kessa said, though the words tasted like ash, "before this gets worse." "No," Vincent's voice was firm. "I will not let them bully me into abandoning you. You have done nothing wrong. I exist. That is crime enough in their eyes. Then their eyes are blind." He carried a sack of flour into the house, and Kessa followed with the lamp oil. "The council might send someone to inspect, but they will find everything in order. You work here voluntarily, you are fed and sheltered, and you cause no trouble. That is the law." "The law and justice are not the same thing," Kessa said quietly. Vincent set down his burden and turned to face her. In the dim light of the house, his expression was fierce. "I know that. I have seen enough injustice to last a lifetime, but I will not participate in it, not in my own home." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. "You belong here, Kessa. You have earned that through your work and your character. I will not let them take that away from you." The touch was brief and careful, but it sent warmth spreading through Kessa's body. She looked up at Vincent and saw in his face something that made her heart race. Not just determination or principle, but genuine care. He was not defending her out of abstract morality. He was defending her because she mattered to him specifically. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there for a long moment, close enough that Kessa could see the flecks of gray in Vincent's eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Something hung in the air between them, fragile and electric. Then Vincent stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should get the rest of the supplies inside before dark." They worked together to unload the wagon, and if both of them were quieter than usual, neither commented on it. But Kessa felt the change, the subtle shift in the gravity between them. What had been friendship was becoming something else, something neither of them seemed ready to name. That night, lying in her small room, Kessa stared at the ceiling and tried to sort through her tangled feelings. She cared for Vincent, that much was obvious. But what kind of caring was it? Gratitude for his kindness, the natural affection of friendship, or something deeper, something romantic, and even if it was romantic, what did that mean? She was an orc, he was human. Their peoples were at war. Even here, far from the fighting, that divide was immense. Vincent might defend her right to exist, but would he want her as more than a worker or friend? Would he want someone like her in the intimate, permanent way that people bonded? The questions chased themselves in circles until exhaustion finally pulled her under. 2 days later, the council inspector arrived. He came alone, a thin man with spectacles and an air of bureaucratic authority. Vincent met him in the yard while Kessa watched from the barn, her heart in her throat. "Mr. Larson, I am Clerk Harris from the Territorial Council," the man announced, dismounting. "I have received complaints regarding your household and need to conduct an inspection to ensure compliance with settlement laws." "Of course," Vincent said, his voice neutral. "What do you need to see?" "I need to examine your orc worker, confirm that she is properly controlled, and that the situation poses no danger to the community." Vincent led the clerk to where Kessa stood, and she forced herself to meet the man's appraising gaze. Harris walked around her slowly, making notes on a paper. "No collar," he observed. "She works voluntarily and has not attempted to flee or cause trouble. The law does not require collaring in such cases. The law is open to interpretation." Harris consulted his notes. "She sleeps in the barn, in a room built for that purpose, yes. You feed her from your own supplies. She works for those supplies. That is the arrangement." Harris made more notes, his expression unreadable. "Some community members have expressed concern that you are treating an orc with unusual familiarity. That you eat meals together, that you allow her freedom of movement, that you have publicly defended her against criticism." "I treat her with basic human decency," Vincent said, his voice hardening. "If that is unusual, it speaks poorly of this community, not of me." Nevertheless, perception matters in matters of security. Orcs are enemy combatants. Kessa has never fought anyone. She was cast out by her clan and enslaved by humans. She has been victimized by both sides and is guilty of nothing except trying to survive. Harris looked between them, his gaze sharpening. "Mr. Larson, I must ask directly, is your relationship with this orc purely professional?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Kessa saw Vincent's jaw tighten, saw the war playing out behind his eyes. "Yes," he said finally. "Purely professional." Something in Kessa's chest twisted painfully at the answer, though she knew it was the only safe response. Harris made a final note. "Very well. I will report to the council that your household is in technical compliance, though I will note concerns about the unusual nature of the arrangement. I recommend you consider relocating the orc to another property before winter sets in. The isolation will make it difficult for us to respond if problems arise." "There will be no problems," Vincent said flatly. "For your sake, I hope you are correct." Harris remounted his horse. "Good day, Mr. Larson." They watched him ride away, neither of them speaking until he disappeared from view. Then Vincent released a long breath. "That could have gone worse," he said, "but it could have gone better." Kessa wrapped her arms around herself. "He thinks I am a danger to you." "He thinks in categories, not individuals. It is easier that way, requires less thought." Vincent turned to face her. "Do not let his prejudice hurt you. His opinion does not matter." But it did matter, because Harris spoke for the council, and the council had power over their lives. Kessa saw the reality clearly. Their peaceful existence here was precarious, dependent on the tolerance of people who did not want to tolerate. The incident left them both shaken and quiet. Winter closed in properly after that, bringing snow that piled in drifts and winds that howled around the buildings. They were effectively isolated, cut off from town by impassable roads. In some ways, it was a relief. No one could bother them here, no inspectors or hostile neighbors. It was just the two of them and the daily work of survival, feeding animals, hauling water, keeping fires burning, cooking meals. They spent long evenings in the main house because it was warmer than Kessa's room. Vincent would read from his small collection of books while she mended clothes or worked on leather repairs. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. The intimacy of it was different from Summer's partnership, more domestic and settled. Kessa found herself watching Vincent in unguarded moments. The way firelight played across his face, the concentration in his expression when he read, the gentleness in his hands when he performed small tasks. She memorized details without meaning to, storing them away like treasures. She caught him watching her sometimes too, his gaze quickly averted when she noticed. But not before she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. One night, a blizzard raged outside with such force that the house itself seemed to shake. Vincent banked the fire high and they huddled near it, wrapped in blankets. "You cannot go back to your room in this," Vincent said. "The wind would freeze you before you made it across the yard. You will have to stay here tonight." Kessa nodded, her heart suddenly racing. It was a practical decision, born of necessity and safety. But it felt significant anyway. Vincent gave her his bed, insisting he would sleep in the chair by the fire. She protested, but he was immovable, and eventually she retreated to the small bedroom, acutely aware that this was where he slept every night, that the blankets smelled like him. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and thinking about the man in the next room. About his kindness and his conviction, about the way he had defended her again and again, even when it cost him. About how safe she felt here, safer than she had ever felt anywhere. About how much she had come to care for him in ways that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. She loved him. The realization struck her like lightning, undeniable and terrifying. She was in love with Vincent Larson, and she had no idea what to do about it. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world blanketed in white. They dug out together, clearing paths to the barn and the well. The physical labor gave Kessa something to focus on besides her racing thoughts, but she could not stop thinking about it. Could not stop wondering if he felt anything similar, or if she was fooling herself. Their relationship was so unusual, built on circumstances that defied normal categorization. Was what she felt real, or just gratitude and proximity creating the illusion of something more? Days passed in their winter rhythm. The solstice came and went, marked by a special meal that Vincent prepared with extra care. He gave her a gift, a new shirt he had sewn himself, fitted to her measurements and dyed a dark blue. "I know it is not much," he said, almost shy, "but I thought you might like something that was yours, made specifically for you." Kessa held the shirt like it was made of gold. No one had made her a gift in years, not since her sister had woven her a belt before the exile. "It is beautiful. Thank you." She gave him what she had made, a pair of warm mittens knitted from wool she had spun herself during long evenings. His face lit up when he tried them on. "Perfect fit," he declared. "You have a talent for this." They smiled at each other over the simple gifts, and Kessa felt the warmth between them intensify. She wanted to say something, to tell him how much this meant, how much he meant. But the words stuck in her throat, too dangerous to release. That night, another blizzard struck, and once again Kessa stayed in the house. This time, Vincent did not immediately offer his bed. Instead, they sat by the fire together, wrapped in separate blankets, watching the flames dance. "Can I ask you something?" Vincent said quietly. "Of course." "Are you happy here?" The question surprised her. "Yes, why do you ask?" "I worry sometimes that you are just making the best of a bad situation, that you feel trapped because you have nowhere else to go." Kessa turned to look at him fully. "I am not trapped. You have given me the freedom to leave if I choose. I stay because I want to be here. Even with all the trouble it causes, the inspections, the neighbors who hate you, the isolation, even with all of that." She took a breath, gathering courage. "I am happy here because of you, Vincent. Because you treat me like a person, because you are kind and decent and good. Because being near you makes me feel safe and valued in ways I never have before." Vincent's expression was intense, his gray eyes searching her face. "Kessa, I need to tell you something." "That inspector asked if our relationship was professional, and I said yes because that was the only safe answer. But it was not entirely truthful." Kessa's heart hammered. "What do you mean?" "I mean that somewhere along the way you stopped being just a worker or even just a friend. You became someone I think about constantly, someone whose happiness matters to me more than my own, someone I cannot imagine my life without." His voice dropped lower. I think I am falling in love with you, and I do not know if that is allowed or possible or wise, but it is true." The words hung between them, precious and fragile. Kessa felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the vulnerability in his confession. "It is allowed," she whispered, "and possible, and maybe not wise, but I do not care because I love you too. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was impossible, but I cannot help it. I love you, Vincent." He reached for her hand, and she gave it freely. His fingers were warm and calloused, familiar from months of working side by side. "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone," Vincent said. "After my brother died, I closed myself off. I thought it was safer not to care too much, not to risk that kind of loss again. But then you came into my life and you changed everything." "You changed everything for me too," Kessa said. "I was ready to give up, to accept that my life would be nothing but survival and suffering. Then you bought me in that market and treated me with kindness I did not know still existed in the world." They sat close now, their joined hands resting between them. The fire crackled and the wind howled outside, but in this small circle of warmth, everything felt right. "What happens now?" Kessa asked. "The council will not approve. Your community will be even more hostile." "I do not care what they approve." Vincent's grip tightened on her hand. "You are the best thing in my life. I will not give you up to satisfy other people's prejudices. But what can we do? We cannot marry, not legally. The laws forbid it. Then we will make our own promises, our own commitment. We do not need a piece of paper to know what we mean to each other." He shifted closer, and Kessa saw her own feelings reflected in his face, longing and hope and fear all tangled together. "Will you stay with me, Kessa? Not as a worker or even just a friend, but as my partner, the person I build a life with." Tears spilled down Kessa's cheeks. "Yes, yes, I will stay." Vincent reached up and gently wiped away her tears, his touch tender. Then, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft and careful, a question and an answer all at once. Kessa's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into the contact, relief and joy and love and promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Me too." They kissed again, less tentatively this time. Kessa felt something in her chest expand and warm like ice melting after a long winter. This was real. They were real together, and it felt like coming home. They spent that night curled together by the fire, talking in quiet voices about hopes and fears and plans for the future. Sleep came eventually, and Kessa drifted off with her head on Vincent's shoulder, feeling safer and happier than she ever had in her life. The next morning brought clarity and bright sunshine. They woke tangled together under the blankets, and Vincent smiled at her with such open affection that it made her giddy. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning." They rose and went about their daily tasks with a new energy, stealing glances and touches throughout the day. Everything felt different now that the truth was spoken, lighter somehow despite the challenges they still faced, because those challenges remained. They were still isolated, still facing hostility from the community, still living in a world that saw their love as wrong or dangerous or impossible. But they had each other, and for now that felt like enough. Winter deepened, and they settled into their new reality. They shared Vincent's bed now, taking comfort in each other's warmth and presence. They were careful about physical intimacy, both aware that rushing things could complicate an already complex situation. But they held each other through the long nights, and that closeness was its own form of connection. Kessa found herself thinking about the future in ways she had not allowed herself to before. What would happen when spring came and the roads cleared? Would Vincent's neighbors escalate their harassment? Would the council try to force them apart? She voiced these concerns one evening, and Vincent listened thoughtfully. "I have been thinking about that too," he admitted. "I think we need to be prepared for trouble. Brennan and his friends will not let this go quietly." "Maybe I should wear the collar again when people come around," Kessa suggested reluctantly. "It might make things easier." "No." Vincent's response was immediate and firm. "I will not ask you to pretend to be property, not for anyone. You are free, Kessa. That matters. My freedom matters less than your safety. Your freedom is part of my safety. Do you understand? If I let them force you back into that collar, if I bend to their hatred, then I lose something essential. I become complicit in the system that hurt you." He took her hands in his. "We stand together as equals, or we do not stand at all." Kessa kissed him for that, overwhelmed by his conviction. She had never imagined finding someone who would fight for her this way, who would risk everything rather than compromise on her dignity. The weeks passed. They made plans, discussing options. Vincent had a little money saved, and they could potentially move farther west, to territories where the laws were more lenient and people asked fewer questions. But that would mean abandoning the land Vincent had worked so hard to build. "I will do it if necessary," he said, "but I would rather stay and fight for our right to be here. I do not want you to lose your home because of me. You are my home now," Vincent said simply. "Everything else is just property." Spring came slowly, the snow melting in patches and then refreezing in the cold nights. But gradually, the world thawed. Green shoots appeared in the fields and the chickens began laying more frequently. The roads became passable again, connecting them once more to the wider world. Vincent made a trip to town to sell preserved goods and purchase seeds for spring planting. He returned in a dark mood. "Brennan is pushing the council hard," he reported. "He is claiming we are a security risk, that allowing an orc to live freely on the frontier will encourage raids. It is nonsense, but people are listening. What will they do? They are talking about requiring you to be collared and registered as a permanent bond servant, legally tied to my property. It is essentially slavery with extra paperwork." Vincent's jaw was tight with anger. "Or they will require you to leave the territory entirely." Kessa felt cold despite the warming weather. "When will they decide?" "There is a council meeting next month. They will vote then." A month. They had a month to figure out how to preserve the life they had built together. That night, lying in Vincent's arms, Kessa made a decision. "I think we should leave. Move west like we talked about. Start fresh somewhere they do not know us." "Are you sure? That is a huge risk. We do not know what we will find out there." "I know what we will find here. Constant fighting, constant justification of our right to exist. I am tired of fighting, Vincent. I just want to live peacefully with you." Vincent was quiet for a long time, his hand stroking her hair. "All right," he said finally. "We will go. I will sell the land and the livestock, gather what we can carry, and we will head west before the council meeting. They cannot stop us if we are already gone." "You have worked so hard on this place," Kessa said, guilt sharp in her chest, "and I will work hard on the next place. With you beside me this time, building something together from the start." He kissed her forehead. "It is not a sacrifice if I am choosing what I want most." They began preparations immediately. Vincent quietly sold some of his tools and equipment to other farmers, claiming he was upgrading. He let it be known he was thinking of selling the land, which drew interest from neighbors looking to expand their holdings. He was careful not to seem desperate or rushed, just a man considering his options. Kessa stayed out of sight during these transactions, not wanting to complicate the sales with her presence. She packed what they would need for the journey: clothes, basic tools, seeds, dried food, medicines. They would take the wagon and horses, leave everything else behind. 2 weeks before the council meeting, a buyer emerged for the land. The price was lower than it should have been, but Vincent accepted it quickly. They had money now, enough to buy supplies and a stake wherever they ended up. They planned to leave quietly at dawn, telling no one. Just slip away before anyone realized they were gone. But 3 days before their planned departure, Brennan showed up with 6 men. Kessa saw them coming from the window and her heart sank. Vincent saw them too, and his expression hardened. "Stay inside," he ordered, grabbing the sword from beside the door. "Vincent, stay inside, Kessa, please." She watched from the window as Vincent went out to meet the men. They dismounted in the yard, forming a loose semicircle that was clearly meant to be intimidating. "Larson," Brennan said, his voice carrying clearly, "we are here on behalf of the council. Word has reached us that you are planning to leave the territory." "That is my business," Vincent replied, the sword held casually but ready. "Not when you are planning to take a dangerous orc with you. The council has decided that your orc represents a security risk and must be secured properly or removed from human lands entirely. Kessa is not dangerous, and she is not going anywhere without me. Then you are in violation of territorial law. We are authorized to take her into custody until the council can determine proper disposition. You are not taking anyone." Vincent's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Get off my land. There are 7 of us, Larson. Be reasonable." From inside the house, Kessa made a decision. She would not let Vincent fight alone, would not let him risk himself for her when she was the cause of this confrontation. She grabbed the long hunting knife from the kitchen and moved toward the door, but before she could reach it, she heard shouting outside. "What in blazes is going on here?" A new voice, gravelly and commanding. Kessa peered out the window to see 3 new riders entering the yard. The man in front was elderly but sat his horse like a warrior, his back straight and his gaze sharp. Behind him rode 2 younger men, both wearing the insignia of territorial militia. "Captain Wells," Brennan said, and his tone had lost some of its confidence. "This does not concern the militia." "Looks like it concerns me plenty," Wells growled. "I heard there was talk of harassing Vincent Larson, and I came to see for myself. What is your complaint against this man?" "He is harboring an orc in violation of security protocols." "Harboring? He bought a worker legally and has employed her on his land. I checked the records myself. Everything is in order." Brennan's face reddened. "The law is clear about orc control. The law is clear that properly supervised orcs can work human lands. I see no violation here." Wells turned to Vincent. "This true you are leaving, son?" "Yes, sir. I sold my land to Marcus Green 3 days ago. Papers are filed with the clerk." "Sorry to see you go. You are a good farmer and a good man." Wells looked back at Brennan. "Seems to me this is resolved. Mr. Larson is leaving the territory voluntarily, which solves whatever problem you think exists, unless you plan to prevent a legal property sale." Brennan looked around at his men, clearly calculating. But Wells had militia backing, which trumped a group of angry farmers. "No, of course not." "Good. Then I suggest you all go home and let Mr. Larson prepare for his journey in peace." The men mounted their horses reluctantly, shooting dark looks at Vincent. But they rode away and Brennan went with them. When they were gone, Wells dismounted and approached Vincent. "I knew your brother," he said. "He was a fine young man, brave as they come. I heard what he did, how he died. That took real courage. Thank you, sir. I also heard you have been taking some heat for treating an orc decently. Want to say I think that is stupid. I have fought orcs and fought beside orcs. They are people same as us, just with different skin. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool. Wells glanced at the house and Kessa realized he knew she was listening. You take care of each other out there, wherever you are going. The world needs more people willing to see past old hatreds. We will, Vincent promised. Wells remounted. Safe travels, Larson. If you ever come back this way, look me up. Always need good people in the militia. Then he and his men rode away, leaving Vincent standing in the yard with his sword still drawn. Kessa ran outside. Are you all right? I am fine. Thanks to Captain Wells. Vincent sheathed the sword and pulled her into a tight embrace. That was too close. We should leave now, tonight, before they come back. Vincent nodded against her hair. Yes, we will pack the wagon and go as soon as it is dark. No point waiting for dawn now. They worked frantically through the afternoon, loading the wagon with everything essential. Kessa went through the house one last time, making sure they had forgotten nothing important. This place had been her first real home in years, and leaving it hurt more than she expected. But Vincent was her home now. Wherever they went, as the sun set, they climbed onto the wagon seat together. Vincent took the reins and Kessa sat close beside him, their sides pressed together. Ready? He asked. Ready. They rolled out of the yard as darkness fell, leaving the homestead behind. The road west was rough and uncertain, but they faced it together. They traveled for 3 weeks, moving steadily westward into territories that were less settled and more wild. They passed through small towns and trading posts, always cautious, always careful not to draw too much attention. Some places were better than others. In one town, an innkeeper refused to serve them when he saw Kessa. In another, a merchant woman smiled and wished them luck on their journey, unbothered by what they were. The world contained both kindness and cruelty existing side by side. Vincent was unfailingly patient and protective, positioning himself between Kessa and any potential threats, speaking for both of them when needed. But he also encouraged her to speak for herself when it was safe, reminding her that she had every right to take up space in the world. They found the place almost by accident. They had been following rumors of a valley settlement where people cared less about background and more about hard work. The valley was beautiful when they finally reached it, nestled between forested hills with a clear river running through it. The settlement was small, maybe 30 families spread out along the valley floor. The people were a mix of humans, a few orcs, and even a couple of half-bloods that showed both heritages. No one stared when Vincent and Kessa rode in. No one immediately demanded to see papers or collars. The settlement leader was a weathered woman named Margaret who listened to their story with sharp attention. We do not have much use for the old prejudices out here, she said finally. Life is too hard to waste energy hating each other over things like species. You work hard, you contribute to the community, you will be welcome. That's simple enough for you. More than simple enough, Vincent said, relief clear in his voice. Margaret showed them available land, a plot near the river with good soil and space for building. The price was fair, and Vincent paid it without hesitation. Welcome to Miller Valley, Margaret said, shaking both their hands. Hope you will be happy here. They built their new home together over that summer, felling trees and shaping logs, raising walls and crafting a roof. Their neighbors helped, a rotating cast of people who brought food and tools and extra hands. No one questioned their relationship. No one demanded explanations. Kessa found herself relaxing in ways she had not known were possible. She could walk through the settlement without fear, could speak freely to others, could simply exist without constantly justifying her presence. They made friends. A young couple who farmed the adjacent land, an old orc man who taught Kessa more about herbal medicine, a blacksmith who traded work with Vincent on tools and hardware. The community absorbed them, and they became part of its fabric. Their house took shape slowly. It was smaller than Vincent's old place, but built with care and love. They designed it together, deciding where windows should go, how large the hearth should be, where to position the bedroom that they would share openly without shame or secrecy. On the night they finally moved into the completed house, Vincent built a fire in their new hearth while Kessa unpacked their belongings. When everything was settled, they stood together in the main room, looking around at what they had created. "It is perfect," Kessa said softly. "It is home," Vincent agreed. He turned to her, his expression serious but tender. "I want to do something. It will not be legal in the eyes of most territories, but it will be real to us." "Is that enough?" Kessa's heart raced. "What do you want to do?" From his pocket, Vincent drew two simple bands made of woven silver wire. The blacksmith had made them to his specifications, twisted together in an elegant pattern. "In my family's tradition, couples exchange rings when they make permanent vows to each other," Vincent said. "I want to exchange these with you, Kessa. I want to promise to stand with you for the rest of my life, to build our future together, to love you in good times and hard times. Will you accept this? Will you be my wife in all the ways that matter?" Tears streamed down Kessa's face. "Yes, yes, I will." Vincent slipped one of the rings onto her finger, and she did the same for him. The silver gleamed in the firelight, a visible symbol of invisible bonds. "I promise to honor you, to protect you when you need protection, and to trust your strength when you do not," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to see you always as you are, brilliant and brave and beautiful. I promise to build a life with you that reflects the best of both our peoples." Kessa took a shaky breath. "I promise to stand with you always, to match your courage with my own. I promise to trust you with my heart and my future. I promise to build a home with you where love matters more than law, where we define what family means." Her voice broke. "I promise to love you for the rest of my days, Vincent Larson." They kissed then, sealing their vows with touch. It felt sacred, this private ceremony in their new home. They had no witness except each other and the fire, but that made it more real, not less. This was theirs, untouchable by outside judgment. That night, they consummated their marriage in the full sense, coming together with tenderness and passion and joy. Kessa had never felt more cherished, more desired, more wholly herself. Vincent treated her like something precious, and she gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, skin to skin, hearts beating in synchrony. "I love you," Vincent whispered against her hair. "I love you," Kessa whispered back. They fell asleep that way, wrapped around each other, two people who had found something neither expected: acceptance, partnership, and a love that defied the boundaries others tried to impose. The seasons turned. They worked their land together, planting crops and raising animals. The harvest that fall was good, and they sold surplus at the trading post for supplies they could not make themselves. Winter came again, but this time they faced it together in a home they had built, with a community around them and a future stretching ahead. Margaret came to visit one snowy afternoon, bringing fresh bread and news from the settlement. "Just wanted to check on you too," she said, settling by their fire. "First winter is always hard." "We are doing well," Vincent assured her. Margaret studied them with knowing eyes. "I can see that. You have the look of people who belong together." She paused. "There is talk of making this settlement official, applying for territorial recognition. If that happens, we will need to establish our own laws about things like marriage and property rights. Thought you might want a say in how those laws are written." Vincent and Kessa exchanged glances. "You mean?" I mean, if this valley becomes its own recognized territory, we get to decide what we allow and what we do not. And I am thinking we should allow any two people who love each other to marry, regardless of what they are. Seems only fair." Margaret smiled. "Of course, that is just my opinion. There will be a community vote, but I wanted you to know it is a possibility." Hope blazed bright in Kessa's chest. The idea that their marriage might someday be recognized legally, that they might have the same rights as any other couple, felt too good to be true. "We would support that," Vincent said. "Definitely. Thought you might." Margaret finished her tea and stood. "I will let you know when the vote happens. In the meantime, stay warm." After she left, Kessa looked at the ring on her finger, the symbol of promises made and kept. It might really happen. We might have everything. "We already have everything," Vincent said, pulling her close. "The rest would just be the world catching up to what we already know." She leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. He was right. They had found each other against impossible odds, had built a life together despite a world designed to keep them apart. The external validation would be nice, but it was not necessary. Their love was real whether anyone else acknowledged it or not. The months passed. Spring came, and with it a child, though not in the way anyone expected. They found her on a trade run to the nearest large town. She was sitting outside the orphanage, small and green-skinned, with tears running down her cheeks. She could not have been more than 5 years old. Kessa stopped walking when she saw the child, something in her chest pulling tight. "Wait," she said to Vincent. She approached the little girl carefully, crouching down to her level. "Why are you crying?" "They said no one wants orc babies," the child sniffled. "They said I will be here forever." Kessa's heart broke. She looked back at Vincent, who had followed her and was now staring at the child with an expression she could not quite read. "What is your name?" Kessa asked gently. "Mira." "That is a beautiful name." Kessa held out her hand. "My name is Kessa and this is Vincent. Would you like to come inside with us and talk to the people in charge?" Mira nodded, taking Kessa's hand with small green fingers that trembled slightly. Inside, they learned Mira's story. Her parents had been killed in a border skirmish 6 months ago. She had been brought to the orphanage, but no one wanted to adopt an orc child. The staff did their best, but resources were limited and prejudice was strong. "We would like to take her," Kessa said before she fully thought it through, "if that is allowed." The matron looked between them skeptically. "You are married." "Yes," Vincent said firmly, showing his ring. "And you can support a child. We have land and income. We can support her." The matron clearly wanted to argue, to find some reason to refuse. But in the end, the desire to have one less mouth to feed won out over her reservations. Papers were signed, and just like that, Mira became theirs. The little girl was quiet on the wagon ride home, processing the sudden change in her circumstances. But when they arrived at the valley and Kessa showed her the room they had set up, Mira's eyes went wide with wonder. "This is mine?" she asked, touching the small bed with disbelieving fingers. "This is yours," Kessa confirmed. "And you can stay here as long as you want. We will take care of you." Mira looked between them, something fragile and hopeful blooming on her small face. "You are orc," she said to Kessa, "like me." "I am orc like you," Kessa agreed, feeling tears threaten. "And Vincent is human, and we are all family now, all 3 of us." Vincent knelt beside the bed, his expression gentle. "We will keep you safe, Mira. You do not have to be afraid anymore." The child launched herself at them, wrapping small arms around both their necks and sobbing with relief. They held her between them, and Kessa felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of family. They had been told she was barren, worthless. The healers had declared her womb dead, had pronounced her incapable of bearing children, and maybe that was true in the biological sense. But here was a child who needed them, who they could love and raise and give a future to. Here was proof that family was more than blood, that worth was more than reproductive capacity. She had not been able to bear a child, but she could be a mother anyway. They could be parents together, giving Mira the home and love she deserved. "Thank you," she whispered to Vincent over Mira's head. He smiled at her, understanding everything she was not saying. "Thank you," he whispered back. They raised Mira together, teaching her to read and work the land, telling her stories of both orc and human cultures. She thrived in the valley's accepting environment, growing confident and curious. The settlement did become an official territory, and the first law they passed recognized marriages between any consenting adults, regardless of species. Vincent and Kessa stood before Margaret and the community council and spoke their vows again, this time with legal weight behind them. Mira stood between them, holding both their hands, beaming with pride. More families like theirs moved to the valley over the years. Mixed couples, outcasts, people looking for somewhere they could be themselves without fear. The community grew and prospered, built on principles of acceptance and hard work rather than prejudice and division. Kessa's healing knowledge became valuable to the settlement, and she trained others in herbal medicine and wound care. Vincent's farming expertise helped establish better crop rotation and storage methods. Together, they became respected members of the community, not despite what they were, but simply because of who they were. They grew old together in the house they had built, surrounded by the family they had chosen. Mira grew up and brought home partners of her own, and eventually there were grandchildren running through the fields. The valley filled with life and laughter, a testament to what was possible when people chose love over fear. On warm summer evenings, Kessa and Vincent would sit on their porch, hands linked, watching the sun set over the hills. They did not talk much anymore, having said most of what needed saying over their years together. But the silence between them was comfortable, companionable, full of shared history. Kessa would look at the silver ring on her finger, tarnished with age but still strong, and remember the journey that brought them here. From that dusty market square where she had been sold as worthless and barren, to this peaceful valley where she had found purpose and family and love beyond measure. They had been told she could give nothing, create nothing, be nothing. But look at what they had built together: a home, a family, a legacy of acceptance for future generations. She had not been barren after all. She had simply been waiting for the right person to help her discover what she could become. "I love you," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. Vincent squeezed her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that made his fingers ache. "I love you too. Always have, always will." Kessa leaned her head on his shoulder and watched their grandchildren play in the twilight. The orc girl who had been sold as worthless had found everything: love, purpose, family, and a place to belong. She had found it with him, the human man who saw her as a person when the rest of the world saw only a monster. Together, they had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them, proving that love could bridge any divide if people were brave enough to try. And that, Kessa thought as the stars began to appear overhead, was the best kind of legacy anyone could leave behind.